Okay, let's go. So today we're discussing how to build your perfect social media content team. The whole point of this is that so your time on social is converting to more leads, more relationships, and increased revenue. So here are the two traditional methods for handling content strategy. Most people are either going the DIY route or they're hiring an agency. However, there are massive challenges in regards to both. And the good news here is that there is a far better option to both of these. So first, let's dive in and discuss the challenges of each of these. Okay, the pitfalls of DIY. Raise your hand if you've experienced any of these. First off, there are so many platforms. The best practices are always changing. I mean, even if you were trying to master one platform, that's pretty time consuming. But now you're looking at Facebook, Instagram, business page, personal page. Do you do TikTok? Do you do stories, lives, YouTube, a blog? I mean, this is why it's not smart to do it yourself. And there's so much content to create and to populate. You end up juggling a lot of time between posting and engaging. The whole thing takes up a lot of time. And ultimately, it's taking you away from your world-changing skills, right? And lastly, did I mention that it's a waste of time? That one's important. So here's the next thing. These are the pitfalls of hiring an agency, and I know this because I didn't come from the world of agencies. I come from the world of lead generation, working closely with an entrepreneur. I didn't know much about this agency world at all. So here is what I've learned about agencies is that generally when you're trying to hire an agency for social, they're limiting the number of platforms to 3. And some of them will do more, but these are general agency social guidelines, right? They're usually focused on vanity metrics. So follower count, number of likes, yes, engagement, but it's a different framework they're looking at, right? They're looking at growth versus something called lead generation or revenue, right? Then they also tend to have a higher price point because of the agency overhead, and we'll dive more into that specific point later. Lastly, it takes a while to nail your voice, your aesthetic, your messaging when you're working with them. There's a learning curve. There's a lag, really a time lag when you start working with them. On a more technical detail, when you're working with an agency, it's slower for changes to happen because most of what you are seeing is pre-scheduled content. And it's when you go to talk to them, you're conversing with your sales rep, your account manager. They're not the one making the changes, so it gets a little bit bureaucratic. And lastly, this one, still a waste of your time, right? The reason why it's a waste of your time as well is because it's so much of it's not in your control. So, lastly, and this one, I actually considered not putting this one in there because this one will anger social media agencies, but this one is very true, so it needed to be shared. Social agencies don't do lead generation. They're not lead generation agencies. That's the whole thing, so they never generate enough leads. So, what's the alternative to this? Insourcing. So the technical definition of insourcing is handling something in-house that used to be outsourced, but I call it building your own in-house dream team. But there are some considerations if you go this route. So you have to consider who are you hiring if you're hiring for social media, right? And this is the fine detail where most people do mess up, which is the whole point of this. When it comes to social hiring, there are 3 actual different types of hires and 3 different levels of pay. And this is something that no one is talking about, which is why there's so much room for error. So, 3 different types of hires. We're gonna be talking about a strategist, a manager, and an implementer. And if this sounds insane, it'll all make sense. So keep watching. So here's the first piece of this. The strategist is the person on your social team who's connecting all the dots, who's creating the overall plan. This is the person, the visionary, who's staying 10 steps ahead, watching trends, making sure the whole vision is on track, and then leading the course correction when necessary, right? There are so many moving pieces to social that if you're not going into it with a full overarching strategy, it's just your efforts aren't going to be as effective at all. So then next up, This role isn't always necessary, but this would be the manager. So oftentimes people think, especially in a business setting, of hiring a social media manager. It's kind of a misnomer. In this situation, we're looking at strategist. The manager is just the one who bridges the role between the strategist and the implementer. So this role isn't always necessary depending on the number of platforms you're working with, the size of your business. You could be good with just your strategist and implementer, but I want to make sure that you know that this position can also be absorbed by someone else within. Say you're an organization and you have a CMO, or you have a brand manager. That person can also act as the social manager, right? So this is a role that isn't always necessary. However, the strengths of having this role is that they're really good with the checks and balances, with adherence to systems, and they have great general overall knowledge. Now, the last piece is the implementer. So the implementer is the one who does it all. This role is so important because this is the person who's actually implementing. Implementers execute on everything. And yes, you want someone with expertise and experience, but this isn't the big picture thinker. And we're gonna talk a little bit about what that looks like. Because each of these different skills, each of these different job roles have different personal strengths, and they need different skill sets. So then that takes us back to, where do most people go wrong in hiring? It's because they're trying to hire somebody that does all of them because they don't know there's a difference. So when you do hire an agency, for example, the reason why your overhead is higher, why you're paying a lot more, is that you're hiring and paying for all of these positions in one, right? So at least if you want results. We're talking, if you're hiring a social media agency to get you more business, then you are going to pay a lot. If you are, say you find someone that's on the cheap, you're likely paying for an implementer, you're paying for more limited platforms, right? When I'm saying you're hiring an agency who's going to handle growth for you, you're looking anywhere from $4K to $7K a month. Yes, I've seen cheaper, but then I haven't seen results from cheaper. So, and I'm not an agency. I just want to give that framework for what you can expect financial outlay for results. So in this case, you're likely going to be interacting with the manager or account rep, maybe a strategist if it's like a boutique, a smaller thing. But you're still going to have an implementer behind the scenes doing the work. So when you are hiring an agency, this is why your financial outlay is going to be a lot higher. And as far as DIY goes, this is why it's impossible, because there's too many platforms, and if you're the one trying to create the overarching strategy, it's a poor use of your time. Like, your strategy mind, if that's your strength, needs to be on your other things. And that's if you're strategy minded. If you're not, then it's really a waste of your brain resources. And then the other aspects of DIY, checking progress, implementation, all of that, it just eats a lot of time, which is why most people are not generating the kind of leads, traffic, growth that they want to via their social. So, smart businesses understand the weaknesses of hiring an agency, and then they attempt to hire in-house. But here's what goes wrong when they attempt to hire in-house. They're usually hiring a manager. Like, this is the post will say social media manager, social media marketer, right? And they're paying it either a manager or an implementer rate, but then they want the results of a strategist and an implementer. And I understand why. It's because most business people, they see social, they see it's posting, and they think, okay, posting platform. But the whole concept of the overall strategy in order to make it generate leads, that's a separate expertise. And that's where smart businesses still go wrong in the hiring. Or they'll think, well, I can hire and then just hand it over, and then the results will come in, and it doesn't work quite that way either. So that's why this result then ends up being no fresh leads, or not enough fresh leads, or discernible growth. I'm not talking account growth either. Account size, I can't say this enough times. The size of your account, the size of your likes, the size of your followers, those are sheer vanity metrics, and those are not what matter. What matters is generating leads. You could have a very small following and be pulling in millions. It literally, not an exaggeration. So, what is the solution to this? And this is not something that you're going to hear anywhere else. So if you do have questions as we go through this, make sure you drop them below. I wanted to make sure we get through this. So I went pretty speedy on some of that front end, more obvious stuff. But now we're going to get into sort of the problem solving, how you implement this, and we'll slow down a little bit. So you're not going to hear this anywhere else. And this is the most cost-effective and results-driven model. It's where you create your own hybrid model. So what you want to do is you want to work with a strategist to create your strategy. And also, this is a sort of thing that you can use in a lot of different areas in your business, right? Larger businesses will pull in a consultant for a period, knowing that the consultant's not going to implement. So you could almost look at it like this. You could look at your strategist as a social consultant, right? So based on your preferences as well, they're going to create your strategy, but they could also provide ongoing support and coaching. That part's up to you. Then what you want to do is you're going to hire an implementer for your full-time work. So this implementer and what they're doing with their implementation is probably not going to use full-time hours, which is good because you need them to have time for community management engagement, which is actually equally important. So, and that's where most of us spend our time in real life anyway. When you're scrolling, commenting, connecting, that's technically community management of your own personal community, right? Most of these platforms, particularly Instagram, are probably, I would say, at least 50% of your results are going to come from engaging. So that is also what you'll want your implementer doing. So the results of this are that you're going to have greater business returns, but also greater efficiency here because it's pure specialization, right? So let's talk about how you actually hire for these two. First off, I'm obsessed with assessments. I love taking personality tests. When I created the copy for our website, I ran it through numerous frameworks to make sure that I'm targeting different parts of the buyer's avatar, like of their brain profile, of different thinking types, right? And so I love these for hiring as well. So the Clifton Strengths 34 is a fantastic one. And then what I use for my actual team, each time we hire, I use the assessment. We work with the team at Mindfluence Revolution. Pure, what's it called? Disclaimer. There's a word I'm looking for, and I'm totally drawing a blank. What I'm saying, though, is that we actually work with them personally. They're a client of ours. What is the word for that? Anyway, so, and what we do with these guys, with the Mindfulness Revolution assessment, is when we're looking for a specific hire, we'll have people take the assessments, like our final candidates, and see where they're going to fit in with our house. I say our house because home office. Yeah, these assessments are fantastic. So, with those things in mind, these are the questions that you would ask your strategist. Now, I put a note on each of these. As far as assessments go, when you're looking for your strategist, or if you wanted to call them a social media consultant, you're looking for someone who's a dominant type, who is visionary, strategic, risk-taking, okay? This isn't where you need like a more relational type or compliant or any of that, because this is the person who's going to come in and be the brains, right? So these are the questions that you're going to ask this person. Obviously, you have your own hiring questions, but these tend to be very telling. So ask them how they developed their strategies. For me personally, the reason why what I do is so different is I don't come from the world of agencies, and I don't come from the world of social media marketing. I come from the world of lead generation. So for me, social media and content is the tool I use in lead generation, right? But my strategies and my expertise were developed on an overarching holistic view of digital marketing, right? So when you ask how their strategies are, perhaps they started out in one specific area, perhaps they started out with an agency or under the wing of, an executive, whatever it is, find that out. That's going to be extremely telling. And then ask them what are the content or campaigns of which they're most proud, because then you get a feel for their voice, their risk, their creativity, and you can see if that blends with yours. I personally have a high tolerance for risk. So some of my favorite campaigns are ones that if a client is more risk averse, they don't like, right? And so that's why now in reverse, if I'm working with somebody, they need a risk tolerance. Otherwise, I'm not a good fit, because for me, I want to be able to maximize my skill set for someone, right? So when you find that out, you'll be able to find out that if their skill set matches what you're looking for. Now, you'll want to ask them if they create systems. This one isn't a judgment question. It's not a requirement that they do create the systems. You just need to know that if they don't, or if you don't want them to, you're going to need to make sure that your implementer can create the systems. That's the one portion of this that's extremely flexible. Who creates a system? It can be the strategist, or it can be the implementer, or your manager if you have that role. But somebody has to do it. Then you're going to ask your strategist what sets them apart. This one could have already been answered, but if it's not clear for you, make sure you ask that, because strategy is something that's extremely unique. And then you're going to ask them what's most important about what they do. Everybody's answer will be different. There isn't a right or wrong on that. It's just important that you ask so that you know. What are the questions that you're going to ask your implementer? Your implementer, the official title of this, if you were putting out a job description, would be a social media assistant or social media manager. If you are a business that hires interns, you could say social media intern. I am personally not into hiring unpaid labor, and most interns tend to be. So you could hire an intern. I'm just not encouraging unpaid labor, if that makes sense. So what the things that you're going to want, in this one as well, as far as assessments and thinking style, because this person is going to need to be a part of your team, they're going to need to be consistent and stable. Totally different assessment personality type that you're looking for here. In this one, you want someone who is compliant, who is stable, who is very relational. You're not going to need somebody who is visionary or a leader or any of that stuff. Now, realizing if they're not, if they don't have those visionary and leader tendencies, then you're going to want to make sure to double down on the communication and the training, and consider having ongoing support for the person. So these are the best questions that you're going to want to ask. You're going to want to ask them what's their favorite method for tracking. Honestly, the answer doesn't really matter. You just want to get a feel for how they do handle it, because you are going to want to have some kind of results. And when I say tracking, I don't mean the typical KPIs where it's like, number of followers, number of it, not that stuff. Like, how are they just tracking what they're posting, how the results are coming through, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be this crazy spreadsheet, but you do need to know their preferences and how to handle it. Also, because the tracking is a great method of communication for you to be able to check out what's going on. Then you want to ask what are their favorite tools for scheduling. That's it's almost a small talk question, but these questions allow you to get to know how they operate. Because this is, your implementer is going to be a piece that's going to need to be I want to say self-sustaining. It's somebody who they need a bit of autonomy, as well as being able to follow directions. So when you find out how they schedule and that sort of thing, it lets you know what you can expect from them. Ask them to describe what community management looks like for them and how they maintain and enhance a brand voice. That is probably the most important part, and this is a piece that a lot of entrepreneurs especially struggle with. Larger businesses, corporations, generally are more likely to have an established voice. Now, a millionaire entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have a brand voice. They just have their own voice. So finding out from an implementer how you go about maintaining and enhancing that will help you to see if that person is the right fit for you and how you can support them in sharing your voice. So again, you're also going to want to ask them what are the content or campaigns that they're most proud of. because this gives you a little insight into their creativity. While for an implementer, nearly everything is being handed to them is about what to post, the best ideas. They're still going to need to use their creativity. So it's not as vital as perhaps what a strategist says. For an implementer, you're still going to want examples of the work that they're proud of. And then you're going to want to find out from them what's most important about what they do. So then the strategist is going to come in. Once you've hired your strategist or your social consultant, and you've hired your implementer, or you've decided who on your existing team is going to be handling this, it is possible as well that you don't have to hire someone new if perhaps you only plan on doing 1 or 2 platforms, or if you just have enough room in your team. You may not need to hire. But once you have your strategist and your implementer, the strategist comes in virtually or in person, and then they do a deep dive with you and with your implementer to discuss the brand, what you offer, what you want to accomplish. This is where the entire vision gets developed, right? Now, depending on your team, it could go one of 2 ways. You could take all of that conversation and then hand it off to your implementer to then create the system, to distill it, to implement it. So that's the short version. Short version, your implementer implements it. Now, the other version, though, is that the strategist creates the system, hands it off to your implementer, and provides ongoing support. So there's flexibility in which of those models that you want to use. Then the result is that you have fresh content in your brand voice across all the various platforms on the internet, generating leads all the time. So if you do have questions on this, because I know I stuck to the slides this time. I didn't really engage with comments or any of that stuff. If you have questions, comments, favorite takeaways, drop them below. I will respond to all of them. And then for the sake of time, we can wrap this up with about me. I'm Sasha Schlossberg. I'm the creator of Good Marketing, and I'm the creator of the 7-Figure Content Blueprint. At Good Marketing, we help entrepreneurs, business owners, and businesses get more of their perfect fit clients by empowering businesses to handle their lead generation in-house with support. So my sweet spot, my zone of genius is content strategy. So what we talked about, those are the things that I do, and that's how I support my clients. And I work with my husband. He's our co-founder, and what he does is SEO and Facebook ads. Same thing, help somebody in-house create your lead generating system. So for more information or to see either of our programs, it's on whatsgood.co. That's whatsgood with 2 U's.co. Thank you so very much for watching, and I do look forward to answering any questions and connecting with you guys soon. All right, bye.